Today, I'm going to be talking with an arts education researcher to hear more about the results of the PACE research study. PACE stands for Partnering Arts, Communities, and Education. That's an acronym we'll use a lot today. The PACE program is an arts integration program started by the IAC back in 2015. This program brings together an arts organization, a teaching artist, and an elementary school to plan out a 3-year arts integration residency that will benefit at least one grade level of students. The artists will work with the students once a week, teaching them the art form, whether it's dance, theater, visual arts. And while they're teaching the art form, they are also incorporating literacy skills, reading, writing, vocabulary, that sort of thing. This is the arts integration model. Both subjects are taught simultaneously, and this will continue for 3 years in PACE with the same group of students. As they go into higher grades, the artist moves up with them. And along with this great impact on the students, the PACE program is also conducting research. We're seeing what the students know at the beginning of the school year and then again at the end, and we're measuring their growth in several key areas. And that's where Dr. Sabol comes in. He's our data magician. Dr. Sabol will tell us more now about what we're seeing in the data about the student growth and the impact of the program. But first, about Dr. Sabol, he is currently the associate head of the Roof School of Design, Art, and Performance at Purdue University. He's a past president of the National Art Education Association. He's a professor of arts education, working with aspiring art teachers every day. And before any of that, Dr. Sabol was an art teacher himself in a rural school district in Indiana, teaching from his art on a cart, I think it's lovingly referred to, traveling from elementary school to elementary school. So welcome, Dr. Sabol. Thanks for being here.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here to share some ideas with you.
Great. Now, I talked about arts integration a little bit, but can you give your interpretation and describe arts integration and how it's different from arts education?
Well, first we might start off with just the idea of integrated learning, and that's something that is used widely in the general field of education. When we talk about arts integration, there's a couple of different twists to that. For example, one layer of arts integration might be the integration of the various art forms. For example, using visual arts and music together, or dance and theater together. So that's one version of arts integration, where you're staying with the arts as the focus groups, if you will. But a broader definition that's used more out in the general field of education includes using the arts, and it can be all of them together, or an individual art, let's just say art education, visual arts education, with perhaps math or language arts or science or physical education or any other of the subject disciplines that are covered in the state standards. So that's a little bit about integration and how teachers might be using it in their classrooms, in arts classrooms, as well as in general classrooms, because oftentimes teachers that are teaching, let's say a second grade teacher might want to incorporate some arts into their reading program or their math program, so that they're borrowing from the arts to help support the learning in those areas.
Yeah, as opposed to arts education, which is a more systematic approach to just the art form. Is that correct?
Yes, and also it should be noted that when we say arts education, the arts typically include dance, music, theater, and of course visual arts. But there's also another one that's incorporated in the Indiana state standards, and that is media arts. And that's a whole separate set of discipline ideas and artistic processes and so on. So, yep.
Great, thanks. So as past president of the NAEA, you've seen a lot of arts ed research. What is unique about the PACE program research that we're doing right now?
I think there's a number of key differences from previous research that's been done. For example, the PACE program uses an artist in residence, an artist that's working with an educator. And that's been done by a number of different groups and a number of different models. However, the PACE model is quite unique in that it uses the artist as the instructor as well as the classroom teacher. They collaborate on everything. The model, of course, uses the content knowledge of the artist. They are experts in their field, but then to help the students in the program learn, the pedagogical background that the teachers bring to this is really critical because or let's say the arts teacher, the music teacher understands developmentally where a student might be. And this is an elementary program, we might point that out. And because of that, tailoring the language and the physical skills that a student might need, this is really very important because the teacher has to provide that knowledge. As a professional artist, they would not have access to that kind of information. And the teacher has to provide that oversight, guidance, direction, so that the artist instruction can really hit the target, where the students are, and to build on their previous knowledge, introduce new things, and so on. So this is really a very critical piece of this. Another thing too, I think that makes this specifically different and unique, and I've not seen many studies that have attempted to do this. We are including literacy development as part of this program. Now, we're not trying to support the language arts standards. Certainly we do. But what we're trying to measure here is how students' abilities to write and speak about what they're learning in the arts while using arts vocabulary, content, concepts, ideas, those types of things. We are measuring that. And that really is a unique thing. Now, at some point, we could maybe make some conjecture or some connections to how this type of research is supporting literacy development in terms of language arts, but that's not the purpose of this study. Another thing I would say, this particular study is not just conjecture or hearsay. We have hard data. This is a longitudinal study we've been doing, and each of the classes that are involved in this and the schools, and there's numbers of them, make a commitment for 3 years of involvement. So we've got data from students and how they have grown from semester to semester, and in fact, year to year. Very critical. Another point that we are looking at here that sets this apart, we're not just developing, looking at arts knowledge. We have a number of different assessments that make this study quite unique in that we are studying, for example, students' general knowledge. What do they know about where do you go to hear a concert or to see a play? Where do you go to view works of art? Those kinds of general knowledge things. But then we go further. We are measuring specific skills, and the teacher works with the artist to match those skills with the children's developmental level. Along with that is arts knowledge. We're measuring what they know about the arts, including their use of vocabulary, because that's part of the learning in elementary is just acquisition of vocabulary to support that learning. Then we're measuring their writing abilities, as I said. And then finally, we are measuring their attitudes. And there's lots of research that suggests that adult attitudes toward the arts, whether they support them and they agree with them, they're engaged with them, those attitudes are formed at very, very early ages with our students. And we're measuring that. So this is an important component. So those are the big hats that separate the PACE program from most other research that I've read and I'm familiar with at this point.
Wow, that's great. And related to student engagement, which I know is another key area we're measuring, what are the results so far with student engagement?
Well, student engagement, we, first of all, the students make a commitment to be part of this program. The school does, and then the students in the different classes are engaged with this program through the whole year. It stretches out and assessments are done at various points to track their progress. So there is this level of engagement. Students are involved in the program. Some other things that in terms of student engagement that are, I'm kind of tiptoeing into results a little bit here, but one of the things with those measures that I outlined just previously, in terms of knowledge and skills and writing capabilities and so on, we have noticed some of the findings in the study that there have been increases in all of those measures over the 3-year period and within each year. That is a significant finding right there. Next thing, this one I kind of stumbled on this by accident and doing some data analysis one time. The pre-test and post-test scores. When we give the post-test in the fall, after, let's say, at the end of the first year, the following, we give the test in the spring. The following fall, I've tracked the scores of the spring to fall retention, and the scores typically are higher in the fall, which means that the students are retaining what they learned the previous spring. So this is really another very important identifier for student engagement. We've noticed also improvement in student skills, the quality of the work. You can see that some of the things that the skills that the artists are teaching in dance and theater, music, and the visual arts are becoming evident in the student product. So there is really very good involvement with that. Their basic knowledge, when they are getting increasingly more complex concepts, they are grasping those and learning how to use them effectively. And then finally, their writing. We've been tracking this, and the vocabulary, knowledge, skills, and ideas that we've been talking about are becoming evident in the work. The pre-test scores that we're writing, many times they didn't use the vocabulary, they didn't refer to the skills or some of the knowledge things. In the post-test, they are, and we're really pleased with that. That shows that they are engaged with the learning and that they are retaining it.
Wow, that's great. And I feel like I already have my answer, sort of, but I wanted to ask you, whenever we're chatting about the results coming out year to year, you say you're excited about something that's going on with the results. So what about these results to you as a professional in your field and as a passionate arts educator? What's exciting to you about these PACE results?
The thing that gets me excited every year is when I'm analyzing the data is to, as a researcher, I'm not allowed to have a bias here, but once the data are in and you analyze them, I'm finding there is growth. And you see this year after year, and it's in all of the disciplines, and it's across the grade levels and across varying schools, because in the different artistic disciplines, we have multiple schools. So it's not just isolated to one school. And this is exciting stuff when you see this program is contributing to these results. There's evidence, and we've got the proof in these data. So this is something that really gets me excited. The other piece of this is the whole notion of collaboration between artists and the teachers. This is a dynamic relationship, and you can see how the artists are depending on the teachers to support what they're trying to teach the students. But in the other reverse, you see the teachers are trying to help the artists shape the messaging, shape the learning for the students so that they can retain this learning, and they have been. So this relationship of the artists working with the teachers, this is really something that is exciting. And when you watch this, the students working with the artists and the teachers are there overseeing this, it's just as it seems like this is the way schools are supposed to work. The teachers certainly have content knowledge of the discipline as well. That's not what I'm talking about. But sometimes the credibility of this content knowledge is reinforced because a professional artist is teaching them. The teachers are professional teachers, obviously, but they have a level of content knowledge, and the artists have somewhat different levels of this. One other piece about this that gets me excited, and this one, I'm sorry for running on here, but is the literacy tracking. This is a major thing because we're not trying to show literacy development in terms of language arts development, but when you start reading some of the pre and post test comments and how the students are expressing their ideas, you can tell that they really have got this. This is quality arts education, I think, at its best in terms of we have a dynamic relationship with all the participants, students, teachers, artists, schools, the community that's involved with this. But then we also have some concrete evidence of learning in the arts, and hopefully it's being sustained. There's a lot more I could be
Yeah,
excited
yeah,
about this
that's
project.
great. You know, I wanted to mention while you were talking about the students and their growth, I didn't mention before, but all of the schools involved in this have similar demographics. That is a restriction of the research program that we fund, that they fit a specific demographics. And that's important because then we can compare apples to apples. That's correct, right?
Yes, when we were selecting the students and even the sampling of the numbers of students and the geographic locations, they are spread into different kinds of considerations. This was a very important part of stratifying our samples and our structures so that we could make those comparisons rather than, well, this is just not a case study in its strictest sense. We're just talking about one particular group of people. We wanted to be able to generalize some results, and I think we've got the evidence to allow us to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So I also wanted to ask, the PACE research started in 2015, and to reach the breadth across the state that we intended, the PACE program will continue until about 2023. So we're not finished yet. We're talking right now about our interim results, but you work with art teachers every day. Where do you see the PACE program and the research that comes out of it having an impact in schools when it's all finished and we can publish our results?
Every school I've ever been into, the ultimate goal of all schools, their mission statement, their vision statement, the principles under which they conduct their education, is to provide the finest quality of education possible for all students, regardless of their ability, any other kind of characterization you might want to have of the students or the location, the community it's in. The bottom line is we need to have quality arts education. All education in any form, but in my case and in our case, arts education. This program is a tool that educators in the arts, in all of the arts disciplines, can use to enhance learning, to really bring it to some new levels, to help students experience arts education on a much higher level than we're capable of doing it as individual teachers. As a former art teacher, I can say there were some things where I wished I had an artist that could come in and show their work, talk about how they developed their ideas, why it's important for students to learn specific things, knowledge or skills, concepts. Why do you need to know this? Because once the students understand there's some goal, that motivates them internally. And when they start to see some results, they look at the pre-work they did and the post-work, they can see the growth. That's an internal motivator. That's something that really works. And anytime you can get students motivated to want to learn what you're teaching them, it's a win-win for everybody. And the PACE program does that. It just does. The evidence is there. So
That's
I see in
awesome.
terms of how this can affect the field. I know in my own area, when I'm at liberty to do this, I intend to share the results with all of my students. And I hope others in higher education will do this as they prepare arts educators so that it's one more tool, not only learning how to write curriculum and do assessments and so on, but what are some instructional methodologies or other kinds of program consideration, development considerations can we learn about so that when the pre-service teachers are out there in their own classrooms, okay, I want to try this idea. And, maybe it's another way of connecting the school and the program to the communities, because that's an important part of this whole program, is that the arts don't exist just in that classroom. And it's important for those in the community to understand the value of the arts education being provided by their schools, but also for the communities to contribute to that education. And this is a very critical piece of why the PACE program is important. Higher education, better quality of education, higher standards, and all. By the way, all of this is standards based. I should mention that we are very mindful of how the standards play a role in all of this education. So
Yeah, I have to agree. And even general education classroom teachers, just to understand an outcome we'd like to see at the Arts Commission is that they understand the artists and the arts community are there for them to leverage. And hopefully with the results of this study that they'll know there is potential for high impact on their students. So it's very beneficial.
When I mentioned arts integration earlier, I said, well, first of all, this is the arts within the arts, but then it can also be arts with other disciplines. And I would suggest that arts educators approach the other grade level teachers or other discipline teachers and say, here's a program. What you do can help what I'm trying to accomplish in my arts program. However, I can contribute to what you're trying to do in your program as well. And that's a very significant and powerful um, partnership. And anytime we can show to students how what they're learning in one area links to another area, that's of critical importance because it kind of cements it and says, well, I'm not just learning this in isolation. Something I learned in art is helping me to express my ideas in language arts or to help me understand a mathematics concept or even something like social studies or any of the other kinds of disciplines that are present in the school. I think that's
Yeah,
an important thing for its impact on general education.
that's great. Well, I can't wait to see the final results in a few years. Thank you for giving us a sneak peek, Dr. Sabol. And anyone who has more questions about the details of this study and the results of the research to date and how we, the demographics of the schools and so forth, that's all available on the Indiana Arts Commission website. We've got several years worth of research for people to read and more details. So we'll put a link in the comment section below and the information. And if you have any questions, reach out to me, Stephanie Haines, at the Indiana Arts Commission, or leave a comment. Thanks so much. Thanks, Dr. Sabol. Have a great day.
Thank you. And thanks to all arts educators and for all you do with our students every day in your classrooms. Hats off to you.